Part 1. The chains you can't see. There comes a moment in every spiritual journey where you begin to realize that your battles are not just emotional, not merely psychological, but ancient and archetypal. You feel the resistance not only in your circumstances, but in your soul's very atmosphere. You take a step forward and something invisible pushes back. You try to heal, but the weight around you grows heavier. You speak truth, only to feel silenced. You try to rise and it feels like something unseen is holding your very destiny hostage. In that, beloved, is a sign. And what you may be facing is not just a general spiritual attack, it may be the presence of a Pharaoh spirit. The Pharaoh spirit is not like others. It is not loud and chaotic like a tormenting spirit, nor seductive like a spirit of lust, nor deceptive like a spirit of confusion. The Pharaoh spirit is authoritative. It seeks to control, to dominate, to enslave. It does not simply torment, it dictates. It does not whisper, it commands. And its primary goal is not merely to cause pain, but to keep you in spiritual bondage, enslaved to a system, an identity, a pattern, a generational curse, a false master. We see this spirit most clearly in the ancient narrative of Exodus. Pharaoh was not just a man, he was an archetype. A symbol of oppressive spiritual power that refuses to release what it has enslaved. Even when God told him, "Let my people go," Pharaoh hardened his heart. That right there is the signature of this spirit, stubbornness against divine instruction. So when you find yourself in a situation where, no matter how much you pray, fast, or command, the resistance becomes more entrenched, more forceful, and more hardened, pay close attention. You may be dealing with a Pharaoh spirit.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
This spirit often hides behind systems, religious systems, family structures, political ideologies, cultural traditions. It operates through authority figures who appear legitimate but are spiritually misaligned. You may encounter it in a boss who gaslights your growth, a parent who manipulates your identity, a partner who controls your voice. Or even in yourself when you resist your own liberation because the pain of freedom feels greater than the comfort of bondage. Yes, sometimes the Pharaoh spirit lives in your own mind, disguised as fear of the unknown. So ask yourself this question: what part of me is still loyal to my own oppressor? One of the clearest signs of a Pharaoh spirit is relentless oppression at the moment of transition. Just like in Egypt, the Israelites were not most oppressed during their enslavement, they were most oppressed when they tried to leave. The same is true for us. When you try to leave a toxic relationship, the attacks intensify. When you try to break a generational curse, confusion erupts. When you step into your calling, everything begins to shake. Why? Because Pharaoh does not fight what it owns, it only fights what it's losing. The Pharaoh spirit manifests in cycles. You start healing, then you spiral back. You declare freedom, and suddenly you're back in old patterns. It makes you feel like you're making progress, only to pull you back into bondage. It gives you just enough relief to keep you from leaving completely. That's how it works, through manipulation and false hope. Like when Pharaoh told Moses, "You can go, but leave your flocks. You can go, but not far. You can go, but leave your children." Partial freedom, conditional liberation. That's another sign. The Pharaoh spirit negotiates your deliverance. But true freedom cannot be negotiated. It must be taken by spiritual force. Another sign is the illusion of productivity in bondage. The Pharaoh spirit will keep you busy serving its system, busy proving your worth, busy building bricks without straw. You'll think you're doing something meaningful, but you're really just surviving, just existing, just maintaining a system that benefits your oppressor. This is why some of you feel exhausted and unfulfilled. You're not tired because you're lazy, you're tired because you're enslaved. So I ask you again, are you building your purpose or building Pharaoh's kingdom with your energy? This spirit also thrives in control over your time and your thoughts. It doesn't just want your body, it wants your will. It wants your loyalty. It wants your internal agreement. That's why it resists when you try to rest, when you try to pray, when you try to meditate, when you try to dream. It will fill your schedule with distractions, your mind with anxiety, your heart with guilt, anything to keep you from meeting the divine. Because Pharaoh knows that one true encounter with the presence of God is enough to break centuries of bondage. Here's something deeper. The Pharaoh spirit doesn't only attack individuals, it attacks deliverers. If you are someone who carries the assignment of freeing others, the Pharaoh spirit will target you early in life. It will try to kill your confidence, confuse your identity, and enslave your mind before you ever reach leadership. Just like it tried to kill Moses as a baby, it will try to destroy you before you even know who you are. That's why some of you have carried rejection, abandonment, and trauma since childhood. Because the spirit of Pharaoh recognized your anointing long before you did. If you are in a season where your very identity is being questioned, where your steps forward are met with supernatural resistance, and your prayers seem delayed or denied, it's not because you lack faith. It's because your freedom threatens an old system. You're not just being attacked, you're being watched. Because once you break free, others will follow. Once you rise, the system falters. Once you speak, others wake up. That's why the opposition is so intense. You are not just a target, you are a threat. Now, how do we begin to break free from this spirit? First, we must name it. You cannot cast out what you keep normalizing. Stop calling it just my personality or just how things are. It's not normal to feel suffocated in your own calling. It's not normal to be in cycles of survival for decades. It's not normal to feel afraid of your own voice. When you name the spirit for what it is, you begin to disempower it. So say it out loud. This is the Pharaoh spirit and I see you now. Second, you must confront the lie that you are helpless. Pharaoh wants you to believe that liberation is impossible, that the system is too big, that the chains are too tight, that your trauma is too deep. But the truth is, you already have the power. It's in your alignment. It's in your voice. It's in your willingness to walk into the unknown. The Israelites didn't fight Pharaoh with weapons they left by obedience. They walked in the direction of freedom, even when it didn't make sense. Can you do the same? Third, you must stop compromising. The Pharaoh spirit feeds on your almost healed, almost free, almost in purpose. It thrives on your hesitation. But the moment you stop negotiating with your destiny, things begin to shift. You must be willing to say, I will not stay here another day. even if you don't know what's next. Even if the wilderness looks terrifying, freedom requires trust. Trust in a bigger voice. Trust in a deeper truth. Trust that you were not created to be a slave to anything, no person, no system, no trauma. But here is a secret Pharaoh doesn't want you to know. It is afraid. Yes, Pharaoh is afraid of you because you carry what he cannot control. You carry divine breath. You carry spiritual inheritance. You carry memory of Eden. And the moment you wake up fully to who you are, the empire begins to crumble from within. That's why it fights so hard. Not because you're weak, but because you're waking up. So I ask you now, what would your life look like if you stopped living in fear of Pharaoh and started living in alignment with God? What would you say? Where would you go? Who would you become? This is not just about you, it's about every soul connected to yours. Every life waiting for the sound of your freedom. When you rise, they rise. When you leave Egypt, you become the map. And finally, know this, Pharaoh never lets go easily. He will chase you to the edge of the Red Sea. He will try to haunt you with memories, guilt, and false promises. But that sea was never meant to drown you, it was meant to drown him. Keep walking, spiritually, emotionally, mentally. Take the step, even when the waters haven't parted yet. Because sometimes the sea doesn't split until your foot touches it. Part 2, the spirit that won't let go. When you begin to walk away from any Pharaoh spirit, you must prepare for backlash. It will not release you without a fight. This is the nature of spiritual systems that thrive on domination. They fear your freedom more than your rebellion. You see, rebellion can be punished, but freedom is contagious. And when you step into your spiritual authority, every other soul around you senses the shift. You start becoming a living contradiction to the system that once held you. You begin radiating something Pharaoh can't explain and can't contain. A Pharaoh spirit often disguises itself as order, logic, and structure. It pretends it's keeping you safe, when in reality, it's keeping you small. It tells you, you're not ready. Who do you think you are? Stay in your lane. But that voice isn't wisdom, it's fear wearing a crown. This voice may even come through people you love, mentors, parents, even spiritual leaders, because Pharaoh spirits use proximity to maintain control. That's why it's so hard to leave. Because it doesn't just hold your body, it holds your loyalty. Sometimes that loyalty looks like guilt. You feel guilty for growing, guilty for leaving that relationship, guilty for not fitting into the box others placed you in. That guilt, it's a leash. And as long as you let guilt define your boundaries, Pharaoh still controls the land you walk on. You must come to the sacred realization that you are not betraying people by becoming who you were born to be. You are betraying yourself by staying silent in the name of false peace. So ask yourself, who are you still trying to please at the expense of your own liberation? The Pharaoh spirit also uses intimidation. It will threaten your comfort, your finances, your relationships. It will whisper, if you leave this job, you'll never find another. If you speak your truth, they'll reject you. If you follow your purpose, you'll be alone. That's because Pharaoh has no real power, only the illusion of it. And like any illusion, it only works when you believe it. The moment you stop agreeing with the threat, it loses its grip. So take a breath and say aloud, I revoke every agreement I made with fear. I break every contract I signed in silence. I choose truth, even if it costs me everything. You will know you're dealing with a Pharaoh spirit when everything in your life starts to feel like an invisible box. You can see the vision, but you can't move toward it. You feel called to speak, yet something chokes your voice. You want to change, but the chains feel internal. That's because Pharaoh doesn't just oppress externally. It builds strongholds in the mind. And the greatest stronghold is this: the belief that captivity is safer than the unknown. But you must understand what looks like safety is often spiritual sedation. Pharaoh doesn't want you dead. It wants you numb, passive, compliant, too exhausted to dream, too distracted to rebel, too broken to rise. That's why when you begin to awaken, you feel emotional turbulence. Your soul is remembering it wasn't made for slavery. That discomfort you feel, that's not failure. That's birth. Something in you is trying to break through the shell of limitation. Here's something almost no one will tell you. Pharaoh's spirits don't always look evil. Sometimes they look like opportunity. They promise you influence if you just compromise a little. They offer you platforms if you water down your message. They give you relationships if you just stay quiet. These are not gifts, they are golden chains. And if you accept them, you may gain the world but lose your soul's voice. You must ask yourself often, is this door a blessing or a bribe? To overcome the Pharaoh spirit, we must begin to reclaim our inner territory. This means confronting every area where we've become passive. Passivity is Pharaoh's playground. When you delay decisions, avoid truth, and numb your intuition, you create space for domination. You must ignite your will again, not through force, but through clarity. Clarity about who you are, about what you carry, about what you're no longer willing to tolerate in your life. Begin by writing it down. Get brutally honest. Where are you still enslaved? In what areas are you building bricks for someone else's vision instead of your own? What systems are you still bowing to in silence? And most importantly, what has God already told you to leave, but you're still negotiating with? This is not a surface-level question. It requires deep excavation, because Pharaoh doesn't just live in palaces. Sometimes it lives in your habits, your excuses, your patterns of delay. And if you're wondering why the attacks have intensified since you made the decision to grow, here's your answer. Pharaoh always increases pressure when it feels threatened. That pressure is not a sign of defeat, it's confirmation that the system is breaking. But here's the paradox. You cannot fight Pharaoh with Pharaoh's tools. You don't overcome this spirit through ego, pride, or aggression. You overcome it through obedience, surrender, and faith. And yes, I said surrender not to Pharaoh, but to the divine. Surrender to the voice that says, you are more than your trauma. Surrender to the calling that refuses to leave you alone. Surrender to the wilderness, because sometimes the only path to promise is through the desert. Pharaoh will try to scare you with the wilderness. Where will you go? What will you eat? Who will follow you? But what Pharaoh doesn't know is that the wilderness is where miracles happen, where manna falls, where water flows from rocks, where identity is forged. One of the most powerful ways to break this spirit is through worship. Not performance, not ritual, but deep, raw, unfiltered communion with the divine. Worship realigns your frequency. It reminds your soul of its true master. Pharaoh hates worship because worship shifts your allegiance. The spirit of Pharaoh cannot stand in the presence of radical, honest worship. It breaks the illusion of control. So when you feel most trapped, most anxious, most stuck, worship. Not to escape, but to re-anchor. You must also become unapologetically protective of your energy. Pharaoh spirits love to wear you down through petty distractions, draining conversations, and constant emotional labor. You must learn to say no, to rest without guilt, to disconnect from systems that exploit your time and call it loyalty. That's not loyalty. That's bondage with a smile. And you weren't born for that. You were born to serve something greater, not to be used by something lesser. You must also become unapologetically protective of your energy. Pharaoh spirits love to wear you down through petty distractions, draining conversations, and constant emotional labor. You must learn to say no, to rest without guilt, to disconnect from systems that exploit your time and call it loyalty. That's not loyalty. That's bondage with a smile. And you weren't born for that. You were born to serve something greater, not to be used by something lesser. Another strategy of this spirit is to isolate you, to make you feel like you're the only one waking up, like no one else sees what you see. That loneliness is a lie. There is always a remnant, always a hidden tribe, always others who are breaking free in silence. So speak, shine, share your story. Your voice is a beacon for others still trapped in the system. Your freedom is not selfish, it's contagious. When you begin to walk fully in liberation, you will notice something strange. You'll start to lose taste for the things you used to crave. The drama, the validation, the hustle. That's not depression. That's detox. Your spirit is recalibrating. You're no longer operating from survival, you're stepping into sovereignty. And with that shift comes clarity, or peace. But don't be surprised when Pharaoh comes back one last time. Just like in the story, it will chase you to your Red Sea moment. It will try to reclaim you, to scare you into returning. But this is where you must stand firm. Open your mouth, declare your freedom, and walk forward into the unknown, into the deep, into the waters that part only for the fearless. Because what drowns Pharaoh is what delivers you. You are not just escaping something, you are becoming someone. The version of you that Pharaoh feared. The version of you that systems can't manipulate. The version of you that answers only to truth. And when you become that, when you embody that, Pharaoh has no more power. Part 3. When Pharaoh falls, walking in the aftermath of deliverance. There is a moment in the spiritual journey when the Red Sea closes, and when the system collapses. When the chains that once held you are no longer around your ankles, but shattered beneath your feet. And yet, what surprises many is how unfamiliar freedom feels. After years, maybe decades, of spiritual bondage, the silence can feel strange. The absence of chaos can make you question if something is wrong. But you are not broken. You are free. And now, you must learn how to live as free. The Pharaoh spirit is gone, but its echo is still in your nervous system, in your habits, in your reflexes. Just because the oppressor is no longer present doesn't mean the oppression is fully gone. You must now unlearn slavery. Yes, freedom requires unlearning. This is the part no one talks about. Breaking the chains was only the beginning. Now the real work begins, healing the mind, restoring the soul, and walking in the full weight of your authority. You may find yourself waiting for the next battle because Pharaoh trained you to live on edge. You were taught to survive, not to rest. But rest is not laziness, it is warfare. It is how you reclaim your rhythm. It's how you tell your nervous system, we're safe now. It's how you tell your soul, it's okay to expand. So I ask you a question most spiritual warriors never consider. Are you ready to live without the war? Or have you become addicted to the battle? This season requires you to trust peace, to let go of hypervigilance, to stop expecting Pharaoh to return. Because if you're not careful, you will recreate the very bondage you escaped just to feel familiar. Some people sabotage their blessings because freedom feels too foreign. Don't be one of them. Learn to receive. Learn to breathe. Learn to move without chains. You are not who you were. You are not where you were. And that means your choices must now reflect your deliverance. But there's another layer to this. After Pharaoh falls, the wilderness begins. And the wilderness is not punishment, it is preparation. It is where identity gets rebuilt, where trust gets tested, where your relationship with the divine becomes personal, not performative. In Egypt, you knew God through deliverance. In the wilderness, you will know God through dependence. Manna, water from rocks, cloud by day, fire by night. It will not always make sense, but it will always be enough. In this season, you must be careful not to reach back for what you've already outgrown. The temptation to return to Egypt will come. It always does. Especially when the path ahead looks uncertain. But remember, Egypt was never a home, it was a prison. Do not romanticize your trauma. Do not glamorize your survival. You are not being called to rebuild what God already destroyed. You are being called to build what has never existed before. In this season, you must be careful not to reach back for what you've already outgrown. The temptation to return to Egypt will come. It always does. Especially when the path ahead looks uncertain. But remember, Egypt was never a home, it was a prison. Do not romanticize your trauma. Do not glamorize your survival. You are not being called to rebuild what God already destroyed. You are being called to build what has never existed before. In this season, you must be careful not to reach back for what you've already outgrown. The temptation to return to Egypt will come. It always does. Especially when the path ahead looks uncertain. But remember, Egypt was never a home, it was a prison. Do not romanticize your trauma. Do not glamorize your survival. You are not being called to rebuild what God already destroyed. You are being called to build what has never existed before. The Pharaoh spirit will try its last trick here, memory distortion. It will whisper, "It wasn't that bad. At least you were provided for. At least you had structure." But those are lies. You had chains, not structure. You had silence, not peace. You had productivity, not purpose. When those memories rise, confront them with truth. Speak to your past as a witness, not a prisoner. Say, I honor what I survived, but I will not be defined by what I endured. Now begins the sacred task of rebuilding your inner world. This means creating new language for yourself. Stop calling yourself a survivor. Start calling yourself a creator. Stop rehearsing the pain. Start rehearsing the promise. Your words shape your world. And the more you speak from freedom, the more your life will reflect that freedom. This is not delusion. This is alignment. The truth is, you are now walking in territory Pharaoh never wanted you to see. And that means you must speak like someone who belongs here. This is also the season to reimagine your relationship with power. Pharaoh taught you that power oppresses, that leadership manipulates, that authority silences. But that was counterfeit power. Divine power liberates. It uplifts. It heals. And now you are being called to become a leader, not a new Pharaoh, but a Moses. One who leads others out of darkness. One who speaks truth without apology. One who carries fire, not fear. But be warned, the temptation to become what once oppressed you is real. Many who leave Egypt bring Pharaoh with them in their leadership. They replicate control because it's all they've known. Do not fall into that trap. Heal your inner Pharaoh before you hurt others with your unhealed power. Authority without healing is just another form of bondage. So ask yourself, am I leading from my wounds or from my wisdom? You are now being asked to steward your freedom. That means setting boundaries, honoring your energy, and aligning your habits with your highest self. Pharaoh took your time, so now you must reclaim your hours. Pharaoh silenced your voice, so now you must speak with intention. Pharaoh distorted your identity, so now you must restore your image through truth, through prayer, through sacred practice. This is not about perfection. It's about devotion. A daily return to your center. And don't forget, freedom is not just personal. It's collective. Your deliverance is a door for others. Your healing is a map. Your voice is a trumpet. There are people still in Egypt who need to know it's possible to leave. Not through religion, not through shame, but through awakening, through alignment, through truth. They don't need more rules, they need to see someone living free. Let that someone be you. This is also the time to rebuild your altar. Not an altar of stone, but of remembrance. Mark this moment in your soul. Write it down, sing it out, dance it through your body. Freedom must be celebrated, because celebration is how you seal the shift. It tells your spirit, this is real. This is happening. I am no longer the one who was chained. And as you celebrate, you become a lighthouse shining for all who are still in darkness. You may still feel echoes of the past, triggers, nightmares, doubt. That's normal. That's residue. But residue is not reality. Don't let temporary feelings determine eternal truth. When those echoes come, breathe. Speak. Remember, you are not in Egypt anymore. You are not building Pharaoh's kingdom. You are building a life rooted in truth, or in purpose, in divine alignment. And as you walk this new path, do not rush to arrive. The promised land is real, but the journey is holy. Every step you take is sacred. Every scar is a testimony. Every tear is a seed. And in time you will look back and see that Pharaoh didn't break you, he built you. Not because he was good, but because the divine used his oppression to awaken your calling. What once buried you has now become your platform. So walk boldly, speak loudly, live freely. The Pharaoh spirit has fallen. The sea has closed. And you are finally home in your body, in your calling, in your truth. This is who you really are.